Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Chapter 6, Dhyana Yoga, text number 10. Yoga yunjeta sadatam. Is that on there? Yeah. Yogi yunjeta sadatam. Atmanam rahisi stitaha. Ekaki yata chitatma. Nirashya parigraha. Yogi yunjita sadatam. Atmanam rahasi stitaha. Ekaki yata chitatma. Nirashya parigraha. Yunjita sadatam. Atmanam rahasi stitaha. Ekakiyata chitatma. Nirashara aparigraha. Yogi unjita sadatam. Atmanam rahasi stitaha. Ekakiyata chitatma. Nirashara aparigraha. Jenske. Yogi Njita Sadatam. Atmanam Rahisi Stitaha. Ekaki Achititatma. Nirashya Parigraha. Yogi, a transcendentalist. Yunjita must cooperate in Krishna consciousness. Concentrate, yeah. Sadatam, constantly. Atmanam, himself, by body, mind, and self. Rahasi, in a secluded place. Stitaha, being situated. Ekaki, alone. Yata chitta atma, always careful in mind. Nirashi, without being attracted by anything else. Aparigraha, free from the feeling of possessiveness. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. A transcendentalist should always engage his body, mind, and self in relation with the Supreme. He should live alone in a secluded place and should always carefully control his mind. He should be free from desires and feelings of possessiveness. Purport. Krishna is realized in different degrees as Brahman, Paramatma, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna means, concisely, we always engage in the transcendent loving service of the Lord. For those who are attached to the impersonal Brahman or the localized Supersoul are also partially Krishna conscious, because impersonal Brahman is the spiritual ray of Krishna, and Supersoul is the all-pervading partial expansion of Krishna. Thus, the impersonalist and the meditator are also indirectly Krishna conscious. A directly Krishna conscious person is the topmost transcendentalist because such a devotee knows what is meant by Brahman and Paramatma. His knowledge of the absolute truth is perfect, whereas the impersonalist and the meditative yogi are imperfectly Krishna conscious. Nevertheless, all of them are instructed herewith to be constantly engaged in their particular pursuits so they may come to the highest perfection sooner or later. The first business of a transcendentalist is to keep the mind always on Krishna. One should always think of Krishna and not forget him even for a moment. Concentration of the mind on the Supreme is called samadhi or trance. In order to concentrate the mind, one should always remain in seclusion and avoid disturbance by external objects. He should be very careful to accept favorable and reject unfavorable conditions that affect his realization. And in perfect determination, he should not hanker after unnecessary material things that entangle him in feelings of possessiveness. All these perfections and precautions are perfectly executed when one is directly in Krishna consciousness, because direct Krishna consciousness means self-abnegation, wherein there is very little chance for material possessiveness. Srila Rupa Goswami characterizes Krishna consciousness in this way. Anasaktasya vishayan itarham upayunjitaha nirbandha Krishna sambandhe yuktam vairagyam uchite prapanchi kataya buddhya hari sambandhi vasuna mukshabhi prityago vairagya palgu katyate. When one is not attached to anything, at the same time accepts everything in relation to Krishna, one is rightly situated above possessiveness. On the other hand, one who rejects everything without knowledge of its relation to Krishna is not as complete in his renunciation. Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1-255 to 256. Krishna conscious person well knows that everything belongs to Krishna, and thus he is always free from feelings of personal possession. As such, he has no hankering for anything on his own personal account. He knows how to accept things in favor of Krishna consciousness and how to reject things unfavorable to Krishna consciousness. He is always aloof from material things because he is always transcendental, and he is always alone, having nothing to do with persons not in Krishna consciousness. Therefore, a person in Krishna consciousness is the perfect yogi. Yogi yunjita saratam atmanam rahasi sthita ekaki yatachitasva nirasha aparigraha. A transcendentalist should always engage his body, mind, and self in relationship with the Supreme. He should live alone in a secluded place and should always carefully control his mind. He should be free from desires and feelings of possessiveness. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswatam Deve Kauravani Pacharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paskatyade Sakarne. Two is always better than one. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswatam Deve Gauravani Pacharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paskatyade Satarne. After explaining what a self-realized person experiences, that is equanimity of mind, both from the material point of view, seeing all material objects as being the same, a value, and at the same time being equipoised in dealing with all different classes of people. Now the process of doing that will be explained, at least the process of Astaga Yoga, Yogi Yunjita Saratam Atmana Rahasi Sthita. So now, more or less, some of the process of yama and niyama is there, which is central point of that, of things that we should do and things that we shouldn't do. We shouldn't be feelings of possessiveness and material desires, which more or less covers many of the other things like stealing and violence towards others, himsa, asatya, untruthfulness. So these are preliminary, because if one's mind is not peaceful, obviously you can't sit in one place for a long time and try and concentrate on the super soul, because there'll be too many other things to worry about. If you go to the forest and you're worried whether you left the lights on in your home, obviously your whole meditation is going to be on your lights. And if you can call someone up, if you had a cell phone in the forest, you could call someone up and check, see if your lights are still on. Or if you had some other attachments in terms of your bank balance, or if your favorite football team was going to win the match or not. If you were worried about those things, you couldn't actually sit in the forest or in the bank of the Ganges and meditate very easily. And if you had any material desires, those are material desires, or feelings of possessiveness. This is my mat that I'm sitting on. I hope no one comes and takes it. Maybe I should get an alarm to protect my mat. And in other words, any material desire will complicate things. Any feeling of possessiveness will complicate things, at least the mind. And then it's not possible to go through the other process, which will be explained later. Now we know Karma Muni performed this Astaga Yoga practice for 10,000 years in Satya Yuga before he obtained perfection. Now we don't even know if we have 10 years or 10 days. We can't even sit in one place for more than 10 minutes without getting disturbed. Therefore, in this age, of course, this is not recommended at all, even for Arjuna, who was able to fight all day long, shooting thousands of arrows. So obviously he was bodily quite strong, mentally quite strong. He was a very powerful warrior. He could even go to any planet in the universe by his mystic power. Now, we can't even go to another country right now. We can't even go next door. So what is our capability of executing such a stringent process as Astaga Yoga? There is no possibility. Sometimes some of our devotees have a hard time chanting 16 rounds. They have a hard time saying Hare Krishna when they're chanting. It's more like shnik, shnik, ram, ram, de, 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 de. And yet, people are imagining that if they perform the Hatha Yoga system, they're making some advancement in this age, just by doing some asanas. Asanas, actually in Hindi, I guess in Sanskrit too, it must mean easy. So there are only two, and the Yoga Sutra by Patanjali, which is the main book for those who are practicing yoga in this age, Astaga Yoga. There's only 2 verses about physical exercise. Just saying that the seat, the asana, should be stira and sukha. It should be comfortable and it should be stable. That's all. That's the whole thing. And yet there's millions of people twisting their bodies and putting their head over their neck and trying to turn themselves into a pretzel. And they think they're performing yoga. They're not even performing yogurt. What to speak of yoga? The actual yoga system. Because as we'll find out, there are certain things like brahmachari, vrata. You're supposed to practice brahmacharya. So having a yoga class where you have all kinds of men and women mixing together in many ways which wouldn't be allowed in public, and all kinds of, absurd yoga, different practices, hot yoga, cold yoga. I don't, there's hundreds of different types of yoga, all in the name of something. I don't know what they were trying to achieve. Not that yoga is bad, because it's more or less comes from calisthenics, which was made because people in the 1900s were very sedentary. So here in Europe, the YMCA, the Young Men's Christian Organization, created these exercises so people can get some movement in their body. Because they were working in factories, they were sedentary. What to speak of nowadays, people are on a computer. So it's helpful to do a little walking, a little stretching, go for something. So you're just not a couch potato, they call it in English, or a fried potato, or a baked potato, or a boiled potato, whatever it may be, that you actually get a little exercise and get the air, the breath circulating. So Prabhupada one time, some of Prabhupada's he was on a morning walk with some of the GBC members, and they passed by someone doing Hatha Yoga in the park, doing some exercises, standing on their head. And Prabhupada asked, "Is that one of our men?" And Ramaswami said, no, Prabhupada, we don't do those things. He said, "Oh, because you're too busy sleeping." So then, I said, but these things are not bad, they're Trikonasana, Sarvanga-san, Shirsha-san, these things are, healthy. So the back of the car when Prabhupada was going, so Ramaswami Prabhu ran up to Prabhupada and said, "Prabhupada, should we do this?" And Prabhupada said, "No, not necessary, not necessary." But Prabhupada wasn't against it, at least in the Western world, where people generally are pretty sedentary, a little stretching. One time, his servant, Kumara, I forget what's Nanda Kumara, he was doing some exercises out in the lawn, and Prabhupada saw him and he called him in and said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, I'm doing this exercises." And Prabhupada said, "Well, it's very good. It's good you're doing." Because otherwise Prabhupada could see, his servants were like 20 years old or something, full of passionate. They were not exactly going to sit at a desk all day long. So Prabhupada understood time, place, and circumstance. But in India, Prabhupada discouraged the devotees from doing this. Because in India, at least, this type of exercises were connected with spirituality. And that you more or less accepted a guru. But usually the guru would be a Mayavadi guru. So Prabhupada didn't want the devotees to get involved in that kind of association. So he discouraged it in India, but he didn't mind it. Even one time, one devotee said, "What kind of exercises could we do?" And Prabhupada got on the ground and he was doing push-ups. So when, if you have to get rid of some energy or whatever, that these things are actually, that's what they're made for. People who are too sedentary. On the other hand, our business is to create the atmosphere by which we can chant Hare Krishna. By which we can, that's in the Nectar of Instruction, Shravana Dasa, that one should go someplace, a holy place, and then try to make the atmosphere spiritualized, where you can give up the sense of proprietorship. That's why it's recommended not to chant Hare Krishna in your office, if you have an office, or why we chant in the temple. Because it's very hard to start worrying about everything that's going on in the temple, because there's nothing going on in the temple, except for people chanting. But if you try and chant in front of your computer, or if you have your phone on, or something's going on, then the tendency is to think about, well, should I take a look? Maybe I shouldn't take a peek. Why? What about this? What about that? So one is more worried about what's going on than one was chanting Hare Krishna. So we come to the temple and we see Krishna's watching me everywhere on four sides. And we might try to concentrate a little bit. Try to actually sincerely call out to Srimati Radharani and Krishna and feel their presence. Try to engage in their loving service. Because unless we can feel their presence, how is it possible to engage in their loving service? We have a little bit of love, but the love has to be directed towards something. To actually experience some reciprocation. Love means reciprocation. So if we're chanting Hare Krishna and we're not feeling Krishna's reciprocation, it means that probably we're not chanting very well. So we have to chant well enough that Krishna, we can feel Krishna's presence, and that's love. When there is a loving relationship between Krishna, the holy name, and ourselves. So we have to chant more lovingly. And then Krishna and try to feel Krishna's presence, and then we can actually experience the atmosphere necessary to advance in Krishna consciousness. it's not even so important to remember Krishna's form, but as to actually try to feel Krishna's presence in the name. Of course, even Kansa remembered Krishna's form, but not with devotion. So devotion is the basic principle of spiritual advancement. Bhakti imam abhijananti yavinyashrasmi tattvataha. So we're chanting not just to listen to ourselves chanting, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Oh, I'm so tired of this. Prabhu, well, I'm paying perfect attention. Yes, we're paying perfect attention, and the more we chant, the more we get depressed. Krishna's listening to us getting depressed. And we're listening to ourselves getting depressed too. So we should chant in such a way as we actually feel good. We actually feel that we're chanting sincerely. If we don't feel like we're chanting sincerely, how is Krishna going to think we're chanting sincerely? If we're chanting just to get our rounds done, and that's the happiness of my life for that day, or that morning, is when the final counter beat goes down and my heart goes up. We should take it as an opportunity to actually connect with Krishna in loving service to Krishna. And therefore we're trying to create the atmosphere. That's why the temple room is supposed to be clean. We have the pictures of Krishna, and sometimes there's some incense or something and whatever. Generally, it's not a good idea to put the lights down completely, because then we'll fall asleep. Even when the lights are on. Well, if the lights are on, at least when we fall asleep, someone can wake us up. They can see we're asleep. So I'll stop there. Any questions or comments?
What is the proper way to overcome sleepiness? What was the best way to overcome sleepiness? And for in ourselves, for example, during japa and during the class.
Get enough sleep at night.
And
go to sleep early enough. And it said in the Bhagavatam that if you're sleepy, then stand up. You could always get a little spray and spray your face. You wake up. Don't eat too much at night. That's a real killer. Because you wake up in the morning still with something, lead in your stomach. And you can't get out of bed because it's too heavy. You have enough energy to lift your stomach out of the bed. So, of course, if we eat too much at night, we'll be tired in the morning. Go to sleep early enough. And don't start surfing the web at night, trying to find out what my friends think about me on Facebook. Because that will also keep us up at night, dreaming of our friends on Facebook.
If somebody feels they need 8 hours of sleep in the night to be fresh, what is the maximum healthy amount for?
Well, whatever you need. More than 8, though, is not recommended. Well, what do you need? Everyone is different. Anything else? Yes.
Hare Krishna. I want to know how to give up material attachment about collecting things.
Collecting things? Live in a temple. You can only collect so many things.
I collect in temple too. So.
What's that?
I collect in temple too, she said.
Well, live in a big temple then. Anything else? Okay, thank you very much. Grantaraj Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, for permanent day.